ladies. So go ahead, shoot away.
Gene, we last talked to you 2 months ago, right after spring practice. What have you focused on over the last 2 months? You have to get ready for the season.
Consistency. That's, obviously it's changed a lot for me because 5 years ago we weren't able to be on the field with the players in the summer and things of that nature. So that's been really interesting for me because we can go back and refocus on things that we weren't where we want to be in the spring. And so everything's about consistency, right? We talk to them all the time about great teachers and great coaches that just have the ability to remove the gray. And so really that's what we're focusing on this summer, going back through spring practice, looking at the things that we did, and their job as players is to ask the questions that remove the gray, let us know when they're unclear on something, and then our job as coaches is to be able to deliver the information so that we can remove the gray. So removing the gray for me always is about developing consistency. And so that's where we started. We started with this weeks ago, and we've made some really good strides, I think.
You had mentioned one of those areas that you wanted to eliminate some of the gray was communication. How is that continuing evolution going in terms of getting the guys where you want them with that baseline?
Yeah, it's really been great, to be honest with you, and that is the lion's share of, it's like anything, I say it all the time, when there's communication breakdowns in anything, you're not going to be very good. But I think that they're continuing to improve, and I think the more they understand the scheme and going back over things and looking at what we weren't good at in the spring and when we weren't good, why weren't we good, usually it comes down to communication of some sort, right? So the communication's gotten better. It's an ongoing, evolving process, but the kids are all in and they're really trying to understand everything well enough to know that to be good at the communication game. So that's been a huge part of what we're doing as well this summer.
Jim, a lot of times great players don't necessarily make great coaches, but it seems like Dre Bly has kind of, gotten a hold of this thing pretty fast and made a good transition. What have you seen from him in terms of how he relates to the players and kind of gets his message across?
Well, I think everything starts with humility. And I think Dre understands that, being new to the coaching game in the college world, that, you have to be open to learning. And I think he's been really great at being open. When you're, like you said, when you're a great player, things come naturally to you, usually. To be a great coach, you have to coach those that it doesn't necessarily come natural to. And that's where I think Dre's, really growing as a coach and done a great job of communicating with the players, growing and learning new things. I mean, the things that we do in the secondary now, I think there's a lot of, nuances in there that require some, open minds and require that, you study it and you change and you evolve, right? Everybody does things differently, and a lot of the things that we do are different. But I think Dre's done a great job of learning that, being open to learning it, and wanting to be a great coach. It's really interesting. When I was here the first time in 2015 and 16, he had come and spent several days with us, and we wanted him to sit in meetings because he wanted to get into coaching. And, he had come, and of course, we loved having him around. So he was in meetings, and, he kind of shadowed us for, a couple of days, and it might even been a week or more, at different times. You could tell that he wanted to be a great coach. So I think everything is the want-to, the willingness, and the humility to be able to have an open mind and say, look, I want to learn. I knew how to do it as a player, but doing it as a coach is different. And I think he's done a great job of that.
Now that you've had time to absorb what you saw in the spring and really the first 6 months, what are some similarities and differences in the unit that you have now as opposed to when you came here the first time, what you inherited then? And do you think this group is further ahead, especially with respect to talent and talented depth and numbers of guys that you have on defense as opposed to the first time?
Yeah, I think I hate comparing teams then to teams now. I think everything has changed in a lot of ways. But the first thing when I walk through the door that looks different to me is the depth in the defensive line. I mean, that's the glaring difference to me. And it's not only big frame guys that are very athletic, it's the depth and the numbers of those guys. And I think Mac has done a fantastic job, and Tim Cross has done a fantastic job of building a nucleus of defensive line that has a chance to be really, really good. Now, the depth is there. I think the talent is there. And now the next step is making sure that we perform at a level that's consistent with their body types and body frames and athletic ability. And we're not there yet. But I think Tim Cross has done a great job of working in that direction with these guys. We have told them repeatedly that if we don't have a defensive line, we don't have a defense. And that's just facts. So we are going to rely on them to be a huge part of this, stopping the run, rushing the passer, all those things that their bodies are equipped to do. And now we've got to be productive in getting that done. That's probably the biggest glaring difference in the two. And then I think the depth of the secondary and the experience of the secondary would probably be the next thing that jumps out at me is if you're going to compare the two times. And I think, again, it's almost similar in the secondary. We have talented guys in the secondary that have experience, but we got to play better. And we've got to communicate better, we've got to play better, and we've got to deliver on the field and let the talent that we have back there match up to the production. And I mean, that's at every position, but if you just ask me to compare, those are probably the two most glaring comparisons to what we have in terms of personnel and depth at those two, segments of our defense based on, comparing number 15 and 16 is different.
As a follow-up to that, we're having the numbers up front, and if they are performing, how much does that allow you to kind of throw more at the guys early when you get to fall camp?
That's always the question, right? Like, how much are you going to throw at these guys? But, again, big picture for me is I still say less is more. And, I always tell the guys, you want to be consistently good instead of occasionally great, right? And so to do that, I think it's all about repetitions and, knowing where everybody fits in the defense and be able to handle all the different things that the offenses throw at you. You've heard me say this before. We don't have a lot of defense. And that's by design. And when you have the bodies and the frames and the athletic ability that Coach Brown and the defensive staff have recruited here, then that's philosophically how I feel, that we don't have a lot of defense. So throwing a lot at them is not necessarily, what we do. We throw at them what the next progression is, but we don't get to the next progression until we understand the first part. You know what I mean? It's like math, right? You can't multiply if you don't know how to add. So that's kind of where we are with the progression of everything moving forward.
Gene, the linebackers lost a big leader, presence in Jeremiah Gemmell last year. Obviously you weren't here, but I'm curious what you've noticed maybe from Cedric Gray, because he's kind of pegged as the next guy to kind of fill that void.
Well, I think Cedric Gray's leadership ability, his leadership skills has really been valuable to our team at this point. But so is Power Evans. And, so those are the two that, are standing out in the linebacker room. Not that the other young guys don't have the ability to do the same. But Cedric, I think, is he's getting better at the linebacker position. But what we're talking to Cedric about right now is being able to play with a pad level and a physicality that it's mandatory if you're going to be great at that position. If you look at Jeremiah Gemmell, who I know because I recruited him before I left here the first time, Jeremiah always played violent, he always played downhill, he always played with a great pad level, and that's a work in progress for our entire defense right now. Certainly, it's a work in progress for our linebackers. Cedric is really good in space, he's very athletic, he can run, but I think to take his game to the next level, he's got to be a box player that can keep his pads down and start knocking things backwards. And if there's anything that happens at the linebacker spot right now that we're focusing on is pad level knocking things backwards. We're not great at that right now. They know how we feel about it, and that's something that we're trying to work on even now in the summer when we don't have pads on, but we go out there with them, right? And they'll tell you that they hear me yelling and screaming it all the time. Pad level, pad level, pad level. Because again, this game still comes down to getting off blocks and making tackles and playing with low pads and all those things that sometimes we all lose that because we're talking about scheme and how we stop the RPOs and how we get the quarterback runs, all of those things. And those are all valid discussions, but none of that matters if you don't play physical with great pad level and play the game in a physical nature. So the entire defense, linebackers included, said it great, included, we need to focus on that. But he's done really, really well, and I'm very proud of what he's done so far.
Coach, I'm curious to know what was the number one thing you wanted to change with the culture on defense, on your return here to China?
I want him to have fun playing defense. I mean, that was it. Mac has done a fantastic job with the culture here, period. So I don't really feel like, there was a lot of culture change needed in terms of, the guys, having to reinvent the wheel as far as culture goes. But, it's the same thing. When you come in here day one, what do you want? I want the guys to have fun. I want them to communicate. I want them to play physical. Stopping the run on early downs. All of those things matter, but that all goes back to being low pads, playing physical, know where you fit in the defense, and that needs to be a way of life, and we need to do that every day. They're competitive, they want to be good, but the fundamentals of the game right now, if you say if there's anything that I wanted to have an impact on when I came in immediately in terms of what we demand, it's that, and we're not there. We're not there fundamentally right now. We're not. But it's not that they don't want to be. It's that's what we got to practice and emphasize. And my experience with over 30 years of doing this is you get what you emphasize normally, right? So I don't expect it to be any different. I just know that we still have a ways to go to get there.
Coach, in terms of recruiting, what's been the biggest difference right now in UNC football recruiting compared to last time you were here, and even what's changed since you were at Auburn? How's it different now? We've had about a couple months now to go through it.
Yeah, it's a whirlwind. It's been interesting. It's been interesting for me to learn the nuances now. Obviously it's different when you have NIL discussions and you have, there's a lot of different things on the table that weren't there before. But I still think the fundamentals of recruiting haven't changed, right? These kids want to that are interested in North Carolina. The lion's share of these guys want a great education. They want to have a chance to be able to play and win at the highest level. And they want a chance to go to play in the NFL. That's never changing, right? So I think one of the things Coach Brown's done here is just like he did when we were in Texas together. He's brought in some fantastic talent because the culture's right, and it's all about relationships. So that'll never change. People are going to talk about the NIL, and we know that there's influence with all these other factors out there. But normally speaking, recruiting is still about relationships, and it's still about developing those relationships and making sure these guys know that when you come here, we can develop you as a player. That's been a huge emphasis with us when we started talking recruiting. And, we talk about, don't tell them you're going to develop them. We have to show them how. So we've spent a lot of time with recruits coming in defensively on, tell me how we're going to develop them. Don't tell me you're going to develop them. Show me the plan to develop them. What does that look like? So when you have relationships, you can show that you have the ability to develop these guys and get them where they want to be at the next level, and you throw in this amazing education that this university provides, then it makes recruiting easier. Never easy, but easier.
Do you have a role in NIL discussions? Do you talk to mom and dad or kids about that at all?
No, no, I think what Coach has done is he's done a great job of, look, we have silos of people that handle that, and that's great for us. We're never in those. I haven't had one discussion with one human about that. That's not our wheelhouse, right? That's for somebody else who actually has expertise in that. So Our job is to, again, develop relationships with these guys, show them how we can develop them, and you know, show them that they're going to have an opportunity if they come to North Carolina to win. And that's kind of what we hang our hat on, recruiting-wise, at least defensively, everywhere, but certainly on defense.
Gene, Miles Murphy was one of the bright spots on defense last year, second team All-ACC. What have you seen from him this summer that he can do to take his game to the next level and maybe be first team All-ACC this season?
Well, that's our expectation of him. We expect him to be a dominant player in the league. He certainly has the ability to do it. I think consistency for him would be the key, right? He needs to look the same on play number 50 as he does on play number 1. And that's consistency, that's physicality, that's pad level, all of those things, because he's definitely got the talent. But he's one of the guys that you would have to bring up when you're talking about guys that we expect to be able to be a factor in a game. And, you know, I'll be very disappointed if the offensive line coaches that we play aren't always wanting to know where he lines up, whether they send the center his way to block and make sure that we have, you know, extra hats to block him. And we want him to be offended if they don't do that. He ought to be offended. And so that's kind of what I think that's the impact he can have. But his impact this year needs to be much greater than it was last.
Gene, we've talked to you a lot about getting back into coaching, and you've talked about it had to be the right place, the right time. You know, beyond all of that, were there times when you were out, when you were doing TV, that you just found yourself missing like certain aspects of coaching, just beyond the fit and everything? And were there certain things that you were like, geez, I really wish I was doing that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you know, it'd be like, it's like anybody, it's human nature, right? When you do something for so long and then you're removed from it, there's always things that you miss, right? Like, so, you know, for me, there's things I didn't miss. I'm not gonna lie, there's things I did miss. But when you get removed from something, at least me personally, I tend to remember all the things that I loved. Right? And, you know, and it wasn't about the success and all of that. It was more about the players and the competition. And, you know, I told the guys when I left ESPN, I thanked all of them because I told them they were my team for 5 years when I didn't have a team. Because when you're part of a team for 30 years, that's one of the cool things, right? And for 5 years, I didn't have a team of almost 200 people. Right? And ESPN people became my team. And I thanked them for that because I didn't have a team. And when you know, I don't know if you guys work in teams or you work by yourself, you know what I mean? But when you go through your whole work life and you're used to having a team around you, that's one of the things that I definitely missed.
Was there ever just following up on that, was there ever, I don't know, a moment with your wife or your kids or just someone around you where they're like, you got to get back in there and scratch that itch or something like that? Where they saw you physically missing it?
My wife wore me out every year. I mean, she was relentless.
They're not going to do that.
Oh, yeah, mine did. You're leaving it on the table, Gene. I'm not going to say anything, but you're leaving it on the table. But you're leaving too much on the table. But yes, and you know, my entire family knew that this was a possibility one day of me doing it again. And they knew the parts that I missed, and they knew the parts that I loved, but they didn't necessarily remind me as much as my wife did, my kids. So yeah, I got the reminder several times a year. And with every job that I turned down, it was like, here goes another one. They're going to stop coming, you know, all those things. So, but it was all good.
Do you have aspirations to get back to running your own program again, being a head coach again?
I have aspirations right now to be the best fit I can for North Carolina, period, as the guy that runs the defense. And I want to be great for North Carolina. I want to be great for Mac Brown. I want to be great for these kids. I have absolutely zero thought about, am I going to be a head coach? Do I want to? That absolutely means nothing to me. I have done all I can do in that, So I'm going to make that very clear. That's not even in my wheelhouse. You know, I'm extremely happy with this position and where I'm at, working with the people that I'm working with. So all the other stuff is just, it's not even part of any discussion or thought for me personally.
All right, again. We'll switch
good?
it up.
Let's go.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.